Good morning, Alex and friends. I'm Grace. Today is Wednesday, April 22nd, 2026, and you're listening to Alex's News. Today in Riverside, we can expect a high of 67.9 degrees and a low of 51.7. It is a wonderful day to get outside and celebrate Earth Day as we focus on protecting our planet for future generations. Coming up, we will look into the controversy surrounding federal prosecutors, claims that the Southern Poverty Law Center allegedly provided funding to the very hate groups it publicly condemns. We will also investigate why a California sheriff moved to confiscate over 600,000 ballots, despite harboring personal doubts. Beyond these reports, we have several other headlines making waves today. We have a packed show for you, so keep it locked right here to get the full story. Stay tuned for all that and more on Alex's News. We've got two big stories to get to this morning, and we're starting with a bombshell from the Department of Justice. Just yesterday, federal prosecutors announced an 11-count indictment against the Southern Poverty Law Center, the well-known civil rights organization based in Montgomery, Alabama. Ethan, you've been digging into this since the news broke. What exactly is the DOJ alleging here?
Grace, this is a sweeping case. A federal grand jury in the Middle District of Alabama returned this indictment, and it includes 6 counts of wire fraud, 4 counts of false statements to a federally insured bank, and 1 count of conspiracy to commit concealment money laundering. According to NPR and the New York Times, prosecutors allege the SPLC ran what they're calling a massive fraud operation between 2014 and 2023. They've even given it a codename, the Double Play. The case is formally titled United States of America versus Southern Poverty Law Center, Inc., docket number 2:26-crossing-00139, and as of today, it's still in its very early stages.
The Double Play. That's quite a name. What does the DOJ say was actually happening behind the scenes?
This is where it gets really striking. The government's core allegation is that while the SPLC was publicly claiming to dismantle white supremacy, it was secretly funneling money to the very extremist groups it denounced. Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche and FBI Director Kash Patel stated that more than $3 million in donor funds went to individuals associated with violent groups, including the Ku Klux Klan, Aryan Nations, the National Socialist Movement, the United Klans of America, and the National Socialist Party of America. ABC News reports that prosecutors say the SPLC essentially manufactured racism to justify its own existence and keep donor money flowing in.
So how did they allegedly move that money without anyone noticing?
The indictment lays out a pretty elaborate system. Prosecutors say the SPLC set up bank accounts tied to fictitious entities to disguise where the money was coming from and who controlled it. The shell names included Fox Photography, Rare Books Warehouse, Tech Writers Group, and the Center Investigative Agency. On top of that, the SPLC allegedly loaded funds onto prepaid cards to further hide the paper trail. It's the kind of layered concealment that explains the money laundering charge in the indictment.
And the indictment also describes a network of informants. Who are these people?
Right. The DOJ goes into significant detail on a group the SPLC internally called the Fs, short for field sources. These were informants embedded inside extremist organizations. No individual extremist leaders have been named as formal co-defendants in this specific docket, but several are identified by code. The most notable is F-37, who allegedly received $270,000 from the SPLC between 2015 and 2023. According to the indictment, F-37 was a member of the leadership chat group that planned the 2017 Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, Virginia.
Wait, the DOJ is saying the SPLC had someone inside the planning of Charlottesville?
That's exactly what they're alleging. Prosecutors claim F-37 attended the rally at the SPLC's direct instruction, used SPLC resources to coordinate transportation for attendees, and even made racist social media postings under SPLC supervision to maintain their cover. It's a stunning allegation because it suggests the organization wasn't just monitoring extremism from a distance. The government's theory is that the SPLC was actively helping facilitate the very events it later pointed to as evidence of a growing threat.
Were there other informants receiving large sums?
Several. F-27 is described as an officer in the National Socialist Movement and the Aryan Nations-affiliated Sadistic Souls Motorcycle Club. That person allegedly received over $300,000. Then there's F-30, a leader of the National Socialist Party of America, who was paid over $70,000, while simultaneously being featured on the SPLC's own website as a target of their monitoring. And perhaps the most jaw-dropping figure, an unnamed informant who was a member of the Neo-Nazi National Alliance, reportedly received over $1 million over a 9-year period. There's also someone identified only as F Unknown, described as the Imperial Wizard of the United Clans of America.
How was the SPLC responding to all of this?
They're pushing back hard. NPR and CNN report that the SPLC and its interim CEO, Brian Fair, have vowed to fight every charge. Fair argues that this informant program actually dates back to the 1980s under something called the Klan Watch Project. He maintains it was a vital intelligence-gathering tool that, in his words, saved lives by giving law enforcement advance warning of violent threats. Fair also argued that the secrecy around the payments was necessary to protect informants working in extremely dangerous environments.
And is there any historical basis for that claim?
There actually is some precedent. The SPLC did maintain a long-standing, often informal relationship with federal agencies. Back in the 1980s, SPLC data helped the FBI reopen investigations into the 1979 Decatur confrontation, and that led to the conviction of 9 Klansmen. As recently as 2023, a leaked FBI memo from the Richmond field office showed the Bureau was still relying on SPLC designations to assess threats from what it called radical traditionalist Catholics. But here's the critical distinction the DOJ is drawing. Prosecutors in the FBI now say they were never informed the SPLC was paying the leaders of the groups being monitored.
That seems like the legal crux of this. What do legal experts say about where the line is?
That's exactly the key question. Legal experts interviewed by NPR and the New York Times point out that using an informant network is a tactic shared by law enforcement agencies all the time. But the criminal charges here hinge specifically on charity fraud, meaning misrepresenting activities to donors, and bank fraud, meaning deceiving financial institutions. The DOJ argues that unlike federal informant programs, the SPLC's operation lacked the strict Attorney General guidelines and congressional oversight designed to prevent the direct funding of criminal actors. So in the government's view, this wasn't legitimate intelligence work. It was an unregulated operation that crossed legal lines.
Now, this indictment didn't come out of nowhere. There's been tension between the SPLC and the current administration for a while, right?
Absolutely. Back in October 2025, FBI Director Kash Patel officially severed all ties with the SPLC, calling it a, quote, partisan smear machine, end quote. And Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche himself previously served as Donald Trump's personal defense attorney, which has drawn scrutiny. Civil rights groups have accused the administration of engaging in what they call partisan lawfare. On the other side, Republican officials have praised this move. They've long accused the SPLC of unfairly labeling mainstream conservative and Christian organizations as hate groups.
And what about reactions from other civil rights organizations?
The ACLU has been especially vocal. Executive Director Anthony D. Romero condemned the indictment as a, quote, politically motivated attack, end quote, and called it an attempt by the administration to silence critics. He compared the current climate to the McCarthy era. That framing tells you how high the stakes feel for advocacy organizations right now. Whether you see this as accountability or political targeting really depends on which side of the debate you're standing on.
Has the SPLC faced other legal and institutional problems in recent years?
It has, and that context matters. In 2018, the SPLC paid a defamation settlement of $3,375,000 to activist Maajid Nawaz. In 2019, co-founder Morris Dees was fired for workplace conduct violations. And in 2023, SPLC staff attorney Thomas Webb Juergens was arrested on state domestic terrorism charges during a protest in Atlanta. So this indictment lands on an organization that's already been dealing with a string of controversies over the past several years.
Is the DOJ signaling that more charges could be coming?
They are. The DOJ has characterized this indictment of the corporate entity as part of an, quote, ongoing investigation, end quote, into all individuals involved in the double play scheme. Forfeiture actions have also been filed to recover proceeds related to the alleged fraud, so this could be just the beginning. We may well see individual defendants named in future filings, and that would raise the stakes considerably for current and former SPLC leadership.
A truly remarkable case to watch. Ethan, thank you for walking us through all of that.
Of course, Grace.
We turn now to a story that's been building for weeks in Southern California. Riverside County Sheriff Chad Bianco seized roughly 650,000 ballots. An internal emails show the whole thing was driven by fringe activists. Chloe has been following this one closely. Chloe, how did we get here?
Grace, this is one of the most unusual election stories in California history. Internal emails obtained through investigations by CalMatters and LAist show that Sheriff Bianco ordered the seizure of those ballots, despite his own private doubts about the claims behind it. Those emails have been widely cited by ABC News, the Los Angeles Times, and The Guardian. What they reveal is a sheriff who privately dismissed the conspiracy theories but publicly acted on them anyway under sustained pressure from fringe groups.
So who were these groups pressuring him?
The key figure early on was Shelby Bunch, a prominent voice for the New California secessionist movement. According to CalMatters, Bunch started showing up at government meetings in the spring of 2022, alleging what she called epidemic fraud and remote manipulation of voting machines. She wasn't alone, though. A whole network of election skeptics began targeting Riverside County law enforcement, trying to get them to interfere with standard electoral procedures. It was a coordinated campaign that started building in early 2022.
And the sheriff's department initially pushed back, right?
They absolutely did. CalMatters and Siskiyou News report that in July 2022, senior investigator Christopher Poznansky formally concluded there was, quote, no evidence of a crime, end quote, and officially closed the case. That should have been the end of it. But the activists kept pushing, and the pressure only intensified from there.
What changed Bianco's mind?
A big turning point came in September 2022 when Steve Tuminello entered the picture. He's a figure in the Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association, known as CSPOA. Tuminello emailed Bianco directly, appealing to his identity as a constitutional sheriff. That's a movement that claims the county sheriff is the supreme legal authority in their jurisdiction, above state and even federal power. Despite his private reservations, Bianco ordered the investigation reopened under that pressure.
You mentioned his private doubts. What exactly did those emails say?
The leaked emails show a really striking disconnect, Grace. At one point, when Shelby Bunch suggested local supervisors were tied to drug cartels, Bianco replied, quote, this is absolutely ridiculous. Just because someone convinced themselves of something doesn't mean it's reality, end quote. He even described the activists' behavior as acting stupid, yet publicly he was moving full steam ahead with their agenda. It's one of the most revealing parts of this whole story.
So what was the justification for actually seizing the ballots?
It all rested on a so-called forensic audit provided by Greg Langworthy and a group called the Riverside Election Integrity Team, or REIT. They claimed there was a massive discrepancy of 45,896 votes in the November 2025 special election on Proposition 50, which was a redistricting measure. That number sounds alarming on its face, and it's what Bianco used to push forward.
But that number turned out to be wrong?
Completely wrong. ABC 10 and the Riverside Record report that the Riverside County Registrar of Voters, Art Tinoco, provided a detailed technical debunking. The 45,000 vote gap came from REIT using incomplete, preliminary handwritten intake logs instead of official electronic totals. Those manual logs left out entire categories of legitimate votes, including provisional ballots, same-day registrations, and confidential voter records. When you compare the actual official audited totals, the real variance was only 103 votes. That's a 0.016% difference, which is typical of minor human error.
And Bianco moved forward anyway?
He did. In March 2026, deputies showed up and seized approximately 1,500 boxes containing those 650,000 ballots. If you stacked those boxes, they'd reach the height of the Empire State Building. The warrants were signed by Judge Jay Keel, who is a political ally Bianco had previously endorsed. Bianco characterized the whole operation as a fact-finding mission to conduct a manual recount.
How did state officials respond to that?
California Attorney General Rob Bonta called it a constitutional emergency. According to PBS and CBS News, Bonta argued the seizure was flatly illegal because state law requires election materials to remain in the custody of election officials, not law enforcement. But Bianco wasn't backing down. He called Bonta an embarrassment to law enforcement and doubled down on his claim of supreme authority as a constitutional sheriff. It became a direct standoff between a county sheriff and the state's top law enforcement officer.
Is that when it went to the courts?
Exactly. The conflict escalated all the way to the California Supreme Court, which issued an emergency stay on April 8, 2026. That was 2 weeks ago today. The court ordered Bianco to immediately halt the investigation and preserve all seized items. At the same time, the warrants Judge Keel had signed were unsealed, and they revealed something damning. They lacked independent law enforcement evidence and were based almost entirely on the debunked REIT claims.
So where do things stand right now?
As of today, the investigation is completely frozen. The court ordered Bonta and Bianco to agree on a special master to take custody of the ballots, but that process is deadlocked. Just 2 days ago, on April 20th, both sides filed competing proposals. Bonta wants an election administration expert appointed, who would return the ballots to the registrar of voters. Bianco wants a law enforcement figure who would continue the manual count under supervision. They're at an impasse.
There's also a chain of custody problem here, isn't there?
That's a huge concern for state officials right now. Before the stay was issued, Bianco's deputies had already unsealed and manually recounted 12,561 ballots. Secretary of State Shirley Weber has declared any data from what she called this amateur recount legally void. She's now preparing a physical integrity audit to determine whether any ballots were altered or whether voter privacy was compromised during the handling. Once that chain of custody is broken, there are real questions about whether those ballots can ever be considered reliable again.
And this is all happening in an election year?
That's what makes this even more charged. The June 2026 primary is right around the corner, and Sheriff Bianco is a leading Republican candidate for governor of California. The San Francisco Chronicle and Capital Weekly report he's been leveraging this entire legal battle to solidify his image among his base. He's framing the Supreme Court's intervention as a, quote, partisan cover-up, end quote. It's become central to his campaign identity.
Has he said what he'd do if he suspects problems in the primary?
He has, and it's remarkable. Bianco has suggested he may seize ballots in the upcoming June primary if he suspects further issues. That sets the stage for a continued confrontation between local law enforcement and state election authorities. It means California could be heading into another cycle of this exact same crisis, which is why legal experts and state officials are watching every development in the special master fight so closely right now.
A lot of moving pieces there. Chloe, thanks for walking us through all of that.
Thanks, Grace.
Here are some other headlines. President Donald Trump is extending an olive branch, announcing an indefinite extension of the ceasefire with Iran. This flip-flop reverses his previous stance that the truce would expire this evening, April 22nd. Writing on Truth Social, the president noted he is giving Iran's seriously fractured leadership more time to submit a unified peace proposal following a direct request from Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif and Field Marshal Asim Munir. However, the United States will continue to keep a tight grip on the region by maintaining its total naval blockade of the Strait of Hormuz and all Iranian ports. By corking the waterway where 20% of the world's oil flows, the White House is ensuring Tehran remains starving for cash. Consequently, the administration has put Vice President J.D. Vance's travel plans on ice, postponing his departure for negotiations in Islamabad until the Iranian delegation formally commits to the next round of talks. In the Lone Star State, the Ten Commandments are commanding attention in the classroom. The United States Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit ruled 9-8 to uphold Texas Senate Bill 10. This split decision reverses a lower court injunction, finding that the mandate for 16 by 20-inch posters in every public school classroom does not constitute coercive indoctrination. While Attorney General Ken Paxton praised the victory for moral values, the ACLU and a coalition of multi-faith families are taking their prayers to the Supreme Court. This ruling signals a major shift toward a history and tradition standard for religious displays in public institutions, effectively overturning decades of legal precedent. Florida Representative Sheila Cherfilis McCormick has resigned from Congress, effective immediately. She stepped down just moments before a House Ethics Committee hearing regarding her potential expulsion. A 2-year investigation found she violated over 24 rules, including the alleged misuse of $5 million in federal disaster relief funds to finance her 2022 campaign, a move that certainly didn't weather the storm. She has pleaded not guilty to 15 federal counts, and though she labeled the probe a witch hunt, she is the third lawmaker to resign under fire this week, joining Eric Swalwell and Tony Gonzalez. Her departure leaves Democrats with 213 seats, as Governor Ron DeSantis weighs the timeline for a special election in her district. Virginia voters have narrowly approved a plan to redraw the lines of power. A constitutional amendment passed with 51% support, authorizing a one-time mid-decade redistricting that bypasses the state's bipartisan commission. This allows the Democratic-led General Assembly and Governor Abigail Spanberger to implement a map that could shift the state's delegation from a 6-5 split to a 10-1 Democratic advantage. While the Virginia Supreme Court is still weighing the procedural legality of the fast-tracked amendment, leaders say they are drawing a line against national redistricting efforts. Finally, the Department of Justice is hitting the snooze button on digital accessibility. A new rule delays the enforcement of a mandate for state and local governments to make websites and apps accessible to those with disabilities. Jurisdictions with over 50,000 residents now have until April 26, 2027 to comply, while smaller school districts have until 2028. Officials cited resource constraints and admitted they may have overclicked on the effectiveness of AI compliance tools. Though advocacy groups call it a profound disappointment, the move provides temporary relief to local governments facing litigation risks while navigating the digital divide. That's all we have for now. Today's episode was made by Alexander King with Claude Opus 4.6, Gemini Pro 3.1, Gemini Flash 3, and Google Cloud Text-to-Speech. I hope you have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow, Alex.